Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven, no hell. Imagine all the people living for today, living life in peace. Imagine a brotherhood of man. Imagine sharing all the world. Imagine a world that works for all. And that is the global heart vision for the Centers for Spiritual Living. And I think about that. I remember when we first heard that vision, and it was very exciting and wonderful. And here we are some 10 years later, and I'm thinking, how is that working? A world, a world that works for all. So the monthly theme for this month is living everyday wonder. That's the year, and relationships this month. Today, you and me create harmony. Now, I changed that a little because originally it said you and me create society. And when I first read that, I thought, oh, I cannot talk about that. I can't talk about society. I can talk about harmony. And so I changed the title a little bit. And then I started working on it. And I thought, maybe you and me do create society. And so here's the deal, the relationships we have with the broader gathering of people is what creates and continues to create society. And the agreements that we make consciously, and even those we agree to by default, are what affect and govern how we interact and relate to each other. And so the affirmation for today is specifically, it's powerful. It says, I am a powerful catalyst of love within society. So when I ask, what is mine to do if I am a powerful catalyst of love within society, then that gives me something to think about. Where can my little tiny life make a difference in the whole world? How can I be a powerful catalyst of love within society? And so I guess that's one thing at a time. So we've heard this month about there's only God, the way we relate to ourselves, to one another, to the world. And with that universal power, that's all interconnected and it's inseparable. We cannot claim to love God while hating ourselves. We cannot think, like I said, that we are small. I can't think that if I am an activity of God. We cannot declare that it's a just and equitable universe if we don't treat other people, our four-leggeds, our six-leggeds, our eight-leggeds, and the earth unjustly and inequitably. So this month has been our invitation to anchor in the spiritual practice of engaged relationships and actively revel in the wonder of how each relationship is ultimately a relationship of spirit with itself. A relationship of spirit with itself. Because there is only one power, one presence, one infinite source. The source of all has created everything. And so we are that hands, the feet, the voice of spirit on earth, like the song says. And so spirit is in relationship with itself. And what does it want to do? Well, this week, our focus is on the relationship we have with the society in which we live, all while recognizing there are many nuances and intersections to what these relationships mean, how they're formed, how they influence not only those within that particular society, but how they affect the global society, because we know we're all connected. So we're invited to look at and look for the ways we can engage to nurture society and embolden a healthier, compassionate, equitable, and loving relationship for all people. That is a world that works for all. So, knowing that we're all one, we have this living, moving, and being the expression of a unified society calls us to a new paradigm a new evolved way of being where we practice what we know, we practice our teachings, and we're invited not only to embody love, not solely in an individual manner, but in a collective manner. We're all one. It's not, I am one, although I am one with that one. It's like we're all one. All y'all are one. So from Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, he says this. He says, just as it takes a tribe to raise a child, it also takes a tribe to invent a tool, to solve a conflict, to cure a disease. No individual knows everything it takes to build a cathedral, an atom bomb, or an aircraft. What gave Homo sapiens an edge over all other animals and turned us into the masters of this planet was not our individual rationality, but our unparalleled ability to think together in large groups. Thomas Merton says, my successes are not my own. The way to them was prepared by others. The fruit of my labors is not my own, for I am preparing the way for the achievements of another. Nor are my failures my own. They may spring from the failure of another, but they are also compensated for by another's achievement. Therefore, the meaning of my life is not to be looked for merely in the sum of the total of my achievements. It is seen only in the complete integration of my achievements and failures with the achievements and failures of my own generation, society, and time. I'm reminded of a picture that I had once of holding a flashlight. And in a meditation, holding the flashlight for the person that is coming behind you, but also holding the flashlight to show where you're going. So that we're all in this together. We're all on the path. We take different paths, but we're all on the path and our paths cross on our journey. So perhaps you've heard of Indra's net. So this is a metaphor. In the realm of the god Indra is a vast net that stretches infinitely in all directions. And in each eye or connection of the net is a single brilliant, perfect jewel. And each jewel reflects every other jewel, infinite in number, and each of the reflected images of the jewels bears the image of all the other jewels, infinity to infinity. So whatever affects one jewel affects them all. And this shows us that everything contains everything else. At the same time, each individual thing is not hindered by or confused with the other individual things. So in her book, Indra's Net and the Midas Touch, Leslie Thiel writes this. She says, to survive and prosper, communities must find a way to organize themselves, provide and distribute goods, regulate interactions, maintain security, and safeguard individual rights and liberties. And politics refers to the means by which individuals or groups of individuals gain, maintain, exercise, and distribute power to serve those purposes. Power is political in nature when it serves the procedures and institutions by which binding decisions are made for society. And these procedures and institutions are known as government. So here we are. First, people make laws. In our society, we've made these laws. Some laws we can easily identify as being for the protection of society. And other laws are made to protect a certain portion of that society, and they may hurt and harm others by seeing them not as a part of the society, of something separate. So, for example, slavery and Jim Crow in the United States, apartheid in South Africa, anti-Semitism in Hitler's Germany. These are just some examples. But in creating a world that works for all, something worth discussing is the role of our spiritual laws in the creation of societal laws. how do we demonstrate the wonder and magnificence of the divine in, through, and as all that is? So Martin Luther King Jr. tells us this. He says, one of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of the status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent, who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. And today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. I heard something this morning on the radio, and I wanted to share it with you because it talks about people being awake during the change. And Rob's going to play a little video for us.
At Northeast Portland's Augustana Lutheran Church Friday, lift every voice and sing. A group made up of students and faith leaders,
Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Jew, Sikh, Native American spiritual leaders, Christians, and people of just goodwill
lifted their voices with a message.
Out of that grief, it's been turned into action in Oregon.
Reverend Mark Knutson is talking about action against gun violence. He and others with Lift Every Voice Oregon worked to get Initiative Petition 17 on the November ballot.
So they worked to get that on the ballot. They worked together. What did he say? He said Christians, Muslims, Jews, and all the rest of us. That would be us. So all of the faith traditions say that love is at the core. And Mark Knutson, the pastor, said, so we have to take action when our neighbors are bleeding and our children are being shot in their schools. Ernest Holmes says this. He says, if God can only work for us by working through us, we can't afford to hold personal animosities or enmities against the world or members of society. All such thoughts are outside the law and cannot be taken into the heavenly consciousness. Love alone can beget love. So that gives us something to think about. Ernest Holmes is also encouraging in the Science of Mind textbook. He tells us this. He says, the spiral of life is upward. Evolution carries us forward, not backward. Eternal and progressive expansion is its law, and there are no breaks in its continuity. He continues, it seems to me that our evolution is the result of the unfolding consciousness of that which already is and needs but to be realized to become a fact of everyday life. So, a group of university graduates came to visit their old professor. And during the visit, the graduates began complaining about countless difficulties and problems of life. And so, after offering coffee to his guests, the professor went to the kitchen and came back with a coffee pot and a tray. The tray was filled with many different cups: porcelain, glass, plastic. Some cups were simple, others expensive. And when the graduates had picked out the cups, the professor said, notice how all the beautiful cups were picked out, and the simple and cheap ones were left. Wanting only the best things for yourself is normal, but that's the source of your problems and stress. You need to understand that the cup doesn't make the coffee better. Most of the time, it's only more expensive, but sometimes it's hiding what you're drinking. Actually, if all you wanted was coffee, then the cup wouldn't matter, but you consciously picked the best cups and later watch what kind of cups others got. Now think, life is coffee, and jobs, money, position, society are the cups. They're only instruments for maintenance and upkeep of life. The type of cup we have doesn't determine the quality of our life. Sometimes by concentrating only on the cup, we forget to enjoy the taste of the coffee. So for years, possibly since we first developed communication, there have been complaints and commentaries about what's wrong with the world. What's wrong with government? What's wrong with the church? What's wrong with this country or that country? What's wrong with the weather, our jobs, our spouses, our children? And the energy of those complaints has not made things better. It's only when dedicated people see a vision of change and work towards it that any effective and beneficial change have occurred. Think about those people at the Augustana Lutheran Church. They saw something to do. So if we're going to change society, and who doesn't want to change society? Well, those of us that are asleep, then we have to discuss, envision, and become that which we want to be. So, I invite you and I invite myself. I'm specifically inviting myself to just release this fascination with the ills of the world and society. And it doesn't mean bypassing that. It doesn't mean just ignoring it. It's like an ER physician working on a critical patient. He doesn't ignore the illness or injury, but you see and work toward the patient's wholeness and wellness. And so we know that science of mind gives us the same ability to see a condition and to transform, transmute, transcend it in order to reveal the truth. Paramahamsa says, art, freedom, and creativity will change society faster than politics. And John Lennon, whom we heard the song Imagine, he said this, he said, if everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace. And one of my heroes, Buckminster Fuller, said this. He says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So I think that's what the new world is about. That's what new thought is about. It's creating a new model of life, a new model of oneness. So you may have heard it said that when the old guard dies off, then things like racism, genocide, homophobia, terrorism will all vanish. And the old guard, however, are not people. The old guard are systems that people have put into place. And those systems, if left unchallenged, continue to dictate because they never die off. So we have to envision this new and yet still challenge the old because society is an agreement of the people. Krishnamurti says this, he says, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So I'm reminded of the old story about a man who lived in the forest. And as he grew older and older, he started losing his hair until one day on his deathbed, he was completely bald. And that day he called his children into a meeting. He said, look at my hair. It used to be so magnificent, but it's completely gone now. My hair can't be saved. But look outside of the forest. It's such a lovely forest with so many trees, but sooner or later, they'll all be cut down. And this forest will look as bald as my head. What I want you to do, the man continued, is every time a tree is cut down or dies, plant a new one in my memory. And tell your descendants to do the same. It shall be our family's duty to keep this forest strong. So they did. Each time the forest lost a tree, the children replanted one. And so did their children and their children after them, and for centuries. And the forest remained as lush and pretty as it once was. All because of one man and his receding airline. And so if we're manifesting a world that works, that means that we first manifest societies that work for all. And that means our relationship with each other and with those we may never even meet who are affected by laws, policies, and our prayers. We have to be working for everyone. And for example, in many places around the world, there are societal norms that continue to perpetuate hatred and violence against members of a particular community. Members of that community around the world are impacted, even if they don't live in that oppressive culture, they're still impacted by that. Because remember, there's only one mind, there's only one of us. And within the various societal groups, there are people who choose to do the work, to choose to do that work required to change the system, change the law, change the relationship so that everybody has equal rights, protection under the law, and the freedom to live, being their individualized expression of spirit as they are. Our spiritual director at Centers for Spiritual Living, Edward Viljoen, says, our teaching of oneness and wholeness creates the moral compass and a welcoming environment that affirms people of all lifestyles and race as exquisitely individualized expressions of divinity and celebrates their contributions to society. So what do we do with this? As a member of society who is also a practicing metaphysician, we all have the access to the teaching and the tools that can change the structures and foundations of society. And knowing that everything begins and ends in consciousness. This week, I'm going to explore, and I invite you to join me in exploring my own beliefs about society. As I said when I started, this is not a comfortable talk. This is not the talk I really wanted to do. I wanted to talk about harmony and how wonderful everything is because that's where I like to go. But maybe there's some things that I could do to manifest this beyond my own little circle. So how about if I explore my beliefs about society and about where I'm open to or closed off from ideas and experiences of others, about things I don't even know about? Am I willing to explore and understand areas that I have no experience with? I think travel helps do that. So this week, I'm going to seek to learn, to understand, to empathize, and recognize that some people are being denied access to the wonders of society, which are all available to me. So, for example, our culture and society are deeply affected by books, film, TV, music. So, what if we had a discussion about what's mine to do to be a model of honoring and celebrating the diversity of people in society? So, you might know one of my favorite genres is a rom-com. Um, but what if I took some time out instead to look at something different? What if I took some time to look at a documentary, maybe on global warming, maybe on something I don't know anything about, that I don't even know is an issue? So Martin Luther King tells us this. He says, we may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. So this week, and I invite you to join with me as we interact with the world, I'm going to pause and look at the norms that I think are around me and to see what I've agreed to and what I can do to create that world that works for all. And then if I notice something in my surroundings that's not demonstrating this vision, I ask myself, what can I do to be an ambassador of this society that works? And, maybe that's volunteering someplace. Maybe it's helping a neighbor with yard work. Uh, Maybe it's speaking out about rights. Maybe it's sending money or going to help somebody in a third world country with their water infrastructure. There's always the invitation to treat. and to create and build that momentum of wonder where we treat and collectively move our feet. The Buddha tells us this. He says, the value of life is not based on how long we live, but how much we contribute to the others in our society. And I refer back to my early training in the scriptures, Matthew 25:35 through 40. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. A stranger, and you welcomed me. Naked, and you clothed me. Ill, and you cared for me. In prison, and you visited me. And then the disciples said, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison and visit you? And Jesus replied, he said this, he said, whatever you did for one of these, whatever you did for one of these least of these, you did for me. And so that's our call. In many different religions, in many different ways, love is at the core. How do we make our society reflect that love? So I invite you to go with me into prayer now. And the prayer for today, this is actually a prayer by Ernest Holmes. He wrote it as a prayer for our country. I'm expanding it to a prayer for our world. Believing in the divine destiny and in the preservation of liberty, security, and self-expression for all, I offer this prayer. I know that divine intelligence governs the destiny of all, directing the thought and the activity of all who guide its affairs. I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are the gifts of freedom and are the divine heritage of everyone. I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are now operating in the affairs of every individual. I know that divine guidance enlightens the collective mind of the people, causing them to know that economic security may come to all without the loss of personal freedom or individual self-expression. I know that no one can believe or be led to believe that freedom must be surrendered in order to ensure economic security. And I know this. I know the all-knowing mind contains the answer to every problem. I know that every person is now directed by this all-knowing mind and has the knowledge of a complete solution to every problem. And each is compelled to act upon this knowledge to the end that abundance, security, and peace shall come to all. And I know that humankind shall endure, guaranteeing to everyone the life, liberty, happiness, and self-expression. And so knowing all this to be the truth, I simply say amen and amen, ashe, and so it is.